Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Port Hueneme Water Agency regular meeting. Today is April 17th. I am calling the meeting to order. The time is now 4 p.m. Madam Clerk, could you please take roll?
Member Bouchard,
Here.
Member Hernandez.
Here.
Oh, I'm sorry. Member McQueen-Lejeune.
Here.
Ex officio Member Jacobson. Let the record reflect that Member Perez is absent, Vice Chair Debley,
Here.
and I'm sorry about that, Chair Hernandez, but you are present.
We will now hear any general public comments not pertaining to items on the agenda for this evening. Zoom participants, please use the raise hand feature so we can call on you. You will have 3 minutes to provide your comments. This will be the same process for comments pertaining to each agenda item as well. Madam Clerk, does anyone have a public comment for tonight?
We do have one public comment. It says, "Good evening. Changes in atmospheric conditions in 2023 appear to have ended the current long-standing drought. While no one can predict the future, history would suggest that drought conditions will continue to create major problems in future years. This will require ongoing water conservation measures to be implemented on a long-term basis. We can make it rain, but we can adopt technology to reduce water usage. I have 2 suggestions that would help reduce water usage with little or no effort. I live in Port Hueneme and own a rental property in Camarillo Heights. The water in that area is supplied by the Pleasant Valley Mutual Water District. A few years ago, the district installed sensors on the water meters and connected them to an application called Eye on Water. The system allows homeowners to monitor water usage in real time. It can show usage as frequently as once a minute. It also detects leaks and alerts the homeowner and district personnel when one occurs. Something as simple as a leaky flopper in a toilet, a dripping faucet, or a sprinkler valve that does not completely shut off can waste hundreds of gallons a month. The Camarillo property has a large lot which requires irrigation. Prior to the implementation of the remote water metering and Eye on Water, the only feedback I received was a bill every other month. The Eye on Water application has allowed me to monitor water usage and to identify leaks or blowouts. This has saved thousands of gallons over the last several years. Additionally, the system eliminated the need for a technician to visit every meter in the service area. The second suggestion is to have the water district encourage homeowners to install smart irrigation controllers. These units connect to the internet and receive climate data. The controller irrigates when needed and stops cycling when there is adequate water in the soil. They can be controlled manually or remotely with a smartphone. The system I use is the Orbit Beehive, which controls up to 12 valves. They are relatively inexpensive, about $100, and qualify for a small rebate. They save a lot of water. There may be better units on the market, but the Beehive units have worked well for me. I would like to suggest that the Water District consider these suggestions. The cost of installing a monitoring system could be paid for by water users by adding a small monthly fee to the water bill. The cost of installing smart controllers could be encouraged by rebates. Over time, these technologies will reduce water consumption and pay for themselves. Respectfully, David Scribner. And that concludes public comment.
Thank you very much. Moving on for the agenda approval for the Water Agency. May I have a motion and second to approve the agenda?
I think there's a request that since the closed session was not able to be had beforehand, I would move that we approve the agenda order with modification, moving the closed session to the end of the regular business calendar for the open session.
I second.
Madam Clerk, please take roll.
Member Bouchard,
Yes.
Member McQueen-Lejeune,
Yes.
Vice Chair Debley,
Yes.
and Chair Hernandez.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Great, thank you. We do not have any presentations scheduled for tonight. We will now consider items on the consent calendar, which will be enacted in one motion unless an agency member has a request to remove an item for discussion. May I have a motion and second to approve our consent calendar?
I'll move to approve the consent calendar.
Second.
Madam Clerk, please take roll.
Member Bouchard,
Yes.
Chair Hernandez,
Yes.
Member McQueen Lejeune,
Yes.
and Vice Chair Debely.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Great, thank you. We do not have any public hearings tonight, so we will now move on to the business items. Item number 3, which is the PHWA monthly operational report. I believe we have the General Manager, Mr. Martinez, to present tonight.
All right, thank you, Vice Chair, and good afternoon, Board. Today I'll be presenting the operational report for the month of March 2023. I decided to do something a little different. The ops report was done one way for years. So just want to do a quick presentation, just provide the board with some visuals, and just a little bit more information. So moving forward, I'll be doing it in this fashion. So just some key facts, maybe for the newer members. On a daily basis, we serve around 42,000 people per day. With the city, it's around 22,000. The beach district, around 5,400. And then the remaining going to both Port Hueneme Base and Port Mugu. And then the average annual water demand is around 3,900 acre feet. So this is our March water purchase. So United Water, we purchased 225 acre feet, which accounted for about 91% of the total purchase. And then on the state water, the Cayugas side, we purchased 21 acre feet, which accounted for about 9%. And then the average daily demand was about 2.34 million gallons per day. So here's just a consumption split. So in the blue, that's United. And then on the top in the orange, that's Cayugas water. And you can see for this water year, it's pretty consistent. We've been able to kind of maximize our groundwater take and kind of minimize the state water, which is our ultimate goal. So this is a 2-year consumption comparison. So the front row in the blue, that's our current water year. And then on the back side in the orange, that's a previous year. You can see the demands are declining, of course, because of the rains, but over the last 3 years, or last 5 years, it's been declining. So it will be interesting to see over the next year or so, after all the rains and snow, kind of to see what these numbers do over the next year. So same thing here. This is Cayugas, 2-year comparison. And this is why I like these slides. You can see right away in February of last year, the Cayugas take was huge. I mean, and that's not normal. And some of you may recall, we had some electrical issues at the plant. We had our main electrical panel go down. So again, it pops out at you. You can see that that's not normal. And we were on Cayugas at that time for, I believe it was 3 to 4 weeks. So here's our consumption versus our total allocation. So the number on the top, what I did was just divide our total yearly allocation. That's the orange line on top. And on the bottom, that's our actual usage to date. So we used about, so this is United. So we use about 30, I think it's 32% of our yearly allocation. So you can see how we're trending, and just a quick visual for you guys. So this is our member agency split. So when the water leaves the plant, where does it go? So you can see, of course, the city with the most service connections, 112 acre feet, and then the beach district and the bases, 38, 37 acre feet. So silt density index, this is just a monthly average. You can see it doesn't move a whole lot. In January, United had some operational issues that caused the STIs to kind of spike a little bit. What happened was they had to run their deep wells. When they run their deeper wells, you get the higher iron and manganese levels. So, and then just a reminder, Mr. Watkins and myself met with United Water a few weeks back, and they informed us that the iron and manganese treatment facility will be going online this year. So they're going to be having the ribbon cutting, I believe, in July, and I think we all will be invited to that. So And once that goes online, the whole SCI issue should go away. And then, it's reassuring if we do get new members at the plant moving forward. There's no longer a worry for fouling of the membranes because of the iron and manganese. So just to keep that in mind. And then just a couple updates. MKN, as you know, we brought them on to do the strategic planning workshop. That is moving forward. About a month ago, we had our kickoff meeting, Mr. Watkins, myself, Mr. Martinez from the Beach District, and then Mr. Gallagher. Good meeting, a lot of good information from both sides, back and forth. And then we had another follow-up meeting a few weeks ago. And Mr. Gallagher will be coming to present at our next meeting in May. Operational audit. So operational audit, I will be putting that in the budget for this upcoming year. In the JPA, it calls out for this to happen every 5 years. It has not. It hasn't been done since 2015. So that will be happening the next fiscal year. And what they do, they come in, they break down our daily operations, safety, our monthly reports to the state, and then kind of give us a report card on that. And then just a quick update, just a small project at the plant. I'll try to share these type of things whenever I can. So the chemical pumping area, it needed some TLC. So the operators, they came in and they laid down a 2-part epoxy, and it looks really clean. The pictures don't really do it justice, but when you walk in, it looks really nice. So just wanted to share, just give you guys an update. And that's all I have. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Does the agency have any questions for staff? Only questions will be taken at this time. Comments and discussion will be heard later.
Chair Hernandez has her hand raised.
Chair Hernandez, go ahead.
Thank you, Vice Chair Dudley. This does not have to do with your presentation, by the way, which was very good. I liked the way that it was presented and the changes that you made. So thank you for that, Mr. Martinez. But I'm sorry to have to ask you this, but on Facebook, there's been these notices that have been posted many times, repeatedly, over and over again about the water on the base not being safe. And I wish I could say something to that, but I don't know what to say. Other than saying that our water goes through multiple processes and it's safe drinking water. People should not be worried. But do you know anything about what I'm talking about? This
Yeah,
it looks like somebody's trying to get people to sign up for some kind of class action suit. But maybe you've heard about it. I'm not sure.
yeah, I can touch on that a little bit. I believe what you're referring to is the PFAS, which is a fire retardant that was used on the base.
Okay.
I can't get into too much detail, but I can say that we will be testing for that at PHWA in the next coming year.
Okay.
So that will be a statewide mandate to test for, they call it PFAS. Unfortunately, that's all I really have today, but we are looking
Okay.
into that, and I can report out more next month if you'd like.
Okay, I appreciate that. Yes, thank you.
I believe Member Jacobson has a comment.
Wanted to, thank you, Mr. Short. So with regard to PFAS on base, the AFFF is the constituent of concern that you're speaking to. It is widely used throughout the entire region in the U.S. It is a national issue with regard to Safe Drinking Water Act. There are new requirements from Safe Drinking Water Act that are being initiated. Those are being seen by all water purveyors, all those who have permits. There's something that is not to be taken lightly and is something that should be of concern. However, it is not something that is directly connected to Naval Base Ventura County nor any of our activities. So just wanted to put that out there, and it is something that is brought forward normally. So just want to bring that forward.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Were there any public comments received on this item?
No public comments.
Great, thank you. Are there any comments by the agency? Any additional comments? No? Okay, moving on. We have a recommendation to select a director from the Port Hueneme Water Agency to serve as a.
Vice Chair Dudley?
Am I moving on to?
Yes,
Let's see.
it's
Yeah,
to
there we
receive
go.
and file.
What's that?
Oh, just motion to receive and file the report.
I'll move to receive and
Thank
file
you.
the operational report.
Second.
Member
Okay.
Bouchard,
Yes.
Member McQueen Lejeune,
Yes.
Vice Chair Dudley,
Yes.
and Chair Hernandez.
Yes,
Motion approved.
Great, thank you. I got a little ahead of myself on that one. Moving on to item 4, which is the appointment to the Association of Water Agencies of Ventura County Board of Directors. I believe Mr. Martinez will also have a report on this.
Sure, thank you. Yeah, so it's recommended the board select a director from the Port Hueneme Water Agency to serve as a member at large for the existing term March 2023 to March 2024. And that's for the AWA Ventura County Board of Directors. Being that Mr. Rich Rollins is no longer here, AWA reached out to myself and asked if we could fill that role with a member of the PHWA board. So at this time, I'll go ahead and give it back to Vice Chair Dudley.
Great, thank you. Does the agency have any questions for staff on this, or?
I do.
Go ahead, Member Hernandez. Or Chair
Yes,
Hernandez.
thank you. Do you know what the commitment level is to serve on AWA, and when are the meetings, Mr. Martinez?
Yes, so they meet 6 times a year, and the meetings are held the first Thursday of every month at 3 p.m.
Oh, at 3 p.m., okay.
And I was recently absent from a meeting, so I got voted on to serve as a agricultural representative to the AWA because I was absent at a meeting. So that's what happens when you don't show up. And they meet over at the United offices. It's not a huge commitment aside from there's some expectation to attend some of the water symposium stuffs on behalf of the AWA board, but it's not an overly burdensome commitment with a lot of homework or whatnot. So if there was a member here that would like to serve, I'd be happy to nominate him.
Is it a hybrid meeting?
They have allowed,
Meeting?
they have allowed for that recently. In fact, the majority of, I just was appointed and attended my first meeting last month, and the majority of the folks did attend via hybrid. And because it's only a committee appointment, while they notice it, it's not generally, doesn't fall under the Brown Act or those other requirements, so they're pretty flexible.
Yeah. I believe I already sit on the water board in another capacity. Georgiana, maybe you can, well, I can just look at my committee list here. But my preference would be to allow somebody else to do the honors, and
Yeah, I sat as the alternate for this board. It is a good meetings and a lot of good information come from them, as well as symposiums. My role as ex officio does not allow me to sit on that at that capacity. So I just need to decline over.
so did I just hear you volunteer, Mr. Martinez? Is that, are they looking for somebody, a staff? Somebody on the operational level,
Chair
or do they
Hernandez.
want an elected?
Yeah, sorry, Chair Hernandez. It was Nathan Jacobson with the Navy. I have to
Oh.
decline.
Okay.
Mr. Martinez, does it have to be one of the board members, or can it be staff from PHWA?
I believe they're asking for a board member from PHWA, yes.
Well, since I'm not hearing a bunch of volunteers, I'll return the favor. Maybe I will nominate Member Perez. And if upon her return, she decides she doesn't want to, maybe we can have the discussion again.
I will second that.
I'll second. Yeah, I feel compelled as chair that we should have a representative, and I think it's a good link for the chair or the vice chair. Member Lejean, McQueen Lejean, do you know if are you interested at all in doing this?
Not at this time. I have 3 meetings the first week of the month.
Yeah, you know,
already,
that's
so.
the first Thursday of the month. It seems like everybody picks that day for meetings, and I have VRSD that day. I have VCREA that day. I have SCAG meetings on that day. And if I'm lucky, my SCAG meetings end at 2:30. So will we be selecting a primary and an alternate to this position, or is it just one member?
So I believe Mr. Jacobson still has a year on and filling in as an alternate is
Okay.
what AWA let,
Yeah.
yeah.
In all seriousness, I did say I'd second, member Perez, but I do know she works, and I don't know that she can get off, at that time to attend. But if we could table it till our next discussion, is that possible? To see if indeed she's available?
Would it be, I'm understanding that she's not here and I appreciate the respect for it. It's kind of why I said, well, if she declines when she returns, maybe we have the discussion, but maybe if she is able, if we could take the vote on the motion and then maybe Georgiana could reach out to her and tell her the favor we did. And if she declines, we'll bring it back at the next meeting and have the discussion. But that way it's a done deal if she's okay with it.
Okay, well, she nominated me as chair, so I'll just second that motion.
Great. Madam Clerk, we have roll on that?
Member Bouchard,
Yes.
Chair Hernandez,
Yes.
Member McQueen Lejean,
Yes.
and Vice Chair Dudley.
Yes.
Motion approved.
All right, moving on to item 5, which is the 2024 budget preparations. Will staff please present the report? I believe we have the Finance Director, Lupe Acero, here tonight to present.
Good evening, board members. I have a presentation to go over the staff report as it relates to the budget planning for PHWA. Just to go over some of the facts, the annual budget and the annual development plan is due every year before July 1st. In the past, I don't believe that these reports or this budget has been presented to the board before the first of the year. So for one reason or another, it's been prepared and presented after the fiscal year has started. And then the second bullet point is that we want to adopt a budget and a development plan to be presented to the board for approval at the June meeting. So in June, we'll be preparing a budget and as well as a development plan to be presented to the board. So here are some of the recommendations that we have is the annual budget and the development plan. Again, we want to adopt a process which we don't currently have in place right now that will include an annual budget and development plan prior to June, to the board in June prior to July 1st, as is required by the agency operating agreement. The second item that we wanted to discuss and we want to propose is to adopt a reserve policy. We currently do not have reserve policies. I attached to the staff report the city's current fiscal policies, which are the current policies that we have in place. We're looking at also updating those policies for the city. But just as a guideline, I attach those to the staff report because we want to do something similar, at least a couple of reserves for PHWA. As of the June 30th audited financials, the unrestricted fund balance for PHWA was $1,483,260. And that amount on the financial statements is all unrestricted. I'll go through how it is booked on the books right now in the system, but per the audited financials is unrestricted, and the reason is that we don't have policies in place. So we had a policy for capital, policy for emergencies or catastrophic emergencies. We could isolate those dollars every year, and those will be reflected accordingly on the staff report. And then the last one is the capital improvement program reserve as well. So we don't have anything in place right now. Capital is paid as pay as you go, and then it's built into the annual true-up that we do every year. So just a little bit of background on how we're funding these items, and then where we want to go is to set up these policies. Here's the unassigned fund balance breakdown, and this is, when I say in the system, this is basically how we have it. We do have some reserve accounts that we've created in our legacy system, but they are not backed, if you will, by our policy. And so that 1,000,004 of unassigned, in our books, 576,651 is unassigned, and then we have some designation for some of the other items. 172,000 is for the membrane replacement, which that's been an ongoing project for a number of years. But those dollars are in that account reserved for that. We do have a reserve for unexpected, and that's 436,700. And that gets funded every year by $50,000. But again, we don't have a set policy, that it's just something that's been happening year over year. So we put $50,000 in that account. And then the reserve for encumbrance, that's an old encumbrance that has been there close to $300,000 that I would propose we just sweep it into the unassigned. It's really unassigned because we don't have an encumbrance that I'm aware of. But the total is the 1,485,000. So that's the number that is the unassigned that we would be looking at to determine if we want to take some of that amount and set up some reserve for capital, and then continue to fund it going forward. And that's what I have now. Just wanted to have the discussion, and then we can prepare those items and bring them forth when we bring the budget, the fiscal year budget to the board.
Great, thank
Any
you very
questions?
much. Do any members have any questions? Member Bouchard?
Thank you. I appreciate the detail, and some of these questions are just to jog my memory. And you stated that in 2014 is when and I recall that very specifically, the setup of the $50,000 a year for the membrane replacement, as we brought that forward and said, well, we really don't have any reserve balance. So I'm going to set that aside for a second and ask a question. The encumbrance balance, if we go back through the audited years, because the agency historically has not had any encumbrance against it, and I'm curious whether or not that reserve was not established, or those funds, if that was all developed out of the $50,000 a year, or where it originally came from. As you know, right, the city incurred an encumbrance on behalf of Naval Base Ventura County to set it up, and recollects that through the rate process. I'm just curious if there's anything that identifies that, or
I went back. Unfortunately, we changed systems as well, so it was a balance forward. But what it should really represent should be like an outstanding or an encumbrance, just a potential invoice, right, that we expect to spend. But it's been there for a number of years. And that's the reason the auditors don't consider it an encumbrance. So they include the entire fund balance as unassigned. Because we don't have any outstanding invoices or any POs, purchase orders that are open. So I think it was just something that should have been cleared out of that encumbrance account at some point.
Can I'm not being an accountant. I'm going to
Sure.
ask some questions that you'll probably, I'll ask them in a third grade level because I understand it that way, the accounting process. The encumbrance balance, if we're looking at setting up board restricted accounts, would, if you're saying just use, I think you used the term, sweep it into the other accounts, would it not be advisable with some of the other recommendations to just create maybe like an operational reserve, right? Like that's, we create an operational reserve out of that encumbrance balance and call it that, so that the funding that we're concerned about when I read through the staff report of something occurring and where that liability sits on the city's books as the fiscal agent, and attempting to address it that way. And where I'm going with this is, and I'm certainly open as a board member of the Beach District to us discussing how we can manage that. But I don't particularly feel comfortable with developing large reserve balances at the city with Beach District ratepayer monies. We absolutely have an obligation to pay our share, and maybe that's part of the fiscal policy that we develop here, is that the Beach District has some obligation when there's large expenses, that we pay them within some certain amount of time frame and the city notice it, so that it doesn't fall on city taxpayers or ratepayers to fund that. We recognize that, but we've just been through a heck of an exercise at our district and how we're managing our reserve funds and returns on those, and would like for us, we'd be happy, I can't speak for the entire board, but I'd certainly bring it back to the Beach District Board as a recommendation to set up a board restricted account that dealt with that, so that the city wasn't incurring those encumbrances on behalf of us or somebody else and asking city ratepayers if that's something that could be considered, rather than developing large reserve accounts in the PHWA for that. And that was kind of the very close to the discussion we had when we established the $50,000 a year reserve policy at that time, was that each agency had this obligation to make sure we're prepared to pay for capital projects, repairs, and maintenance, but we felt that some small reserve balance or reserve funding would be good for the agency to have on hand. But that's where that conversation landed, in my recollection, and where that came from.
Chair Hernandez?
Thank you, Vice Chair Dudley. First of all, just a point of order. I don't know if our technical team can do anything about this, but the public view is not displaying the slides. We cannot see the numbers that Ms. Lucero was referring to. So if that can be adjusted or corrected, that would be great. Also, I do appreciate Member Bouchard's comments. I think that we do need to make sure we address the issues he brought up. And I'm hoping that Ms. Lucero and her team can bring some recommendations back to us on how we can have a healthy and reasonable reserve fund. My question is, what is a development plan? I've not heard that term before. I'm not sure what that is and how it relates to our budget. Could you define that for us, Ms. Lucero?
Thank you. I'm going to jump in. Mark Watkins here. I'm not sure if you can see us or not.
Oh, thank you, Mark.
Sure. And maybe just a broad comment also, a little bit what you've got going on here is three new sets of eyes looking at an agreement that's been around for a while. So one of the things you heard from Mr. Martinez in the last go around is that our JPA agreement requires us to do an operational audit every 5 years. And we look, and so we go look for the last one, and it's been longer than 5 years. We have been doing the annual audits. And then the same question comes up with, there's a water line break a couple of years ago. Well, who forwarded all the money to get that fixed? And the answer was the city. And then the other agencies paid the city back. And as we started looking and meeting with Mr. Gallagher with the strategic plan and talking about doing some capital projects, there's the need for funding to do these capital projects. So the question comes up again, what kind of reserves do we have? How are we funding these capital projects, especially if they're significant? And in a lot of ways, the city's been carrying the burden of that financial obligation as the fiscal agent. So the city fronts all the money and then gets reimbursed. So it seemed like some sort of level of reserves would be prudent for the agency to carry, because the agency is a separate legal entity. And so for the city to kind of carry all that financial burden seems like a heavy lift also. 100% appreciate Mr. Bouchard's comments in regards to not wanting, district funds or Navy funds or others, sitting in a city account, but they're not sitting in a city account. They're sitting in a PHWA account that the city is the fiscal agent for. So those were discussions we were having internally, and then you look back and you see, well, there's this $50,000 a year. Where's that policy? And we couldn't find that. There's this encumbrance. What that encumbrance appears to be was a purchase order that was written at some time, and they were waiting to make a final payment or whatever that was never done. So it was the time to kind of look at these reserves. And the good news is there's $1.4 million with PHWA's name on it. So it gives the agency some flexibility on how they want to allocate those. And if they want to set up an operational reserve and a capital reserve and whatever, we got some money to start that, which is nice. But that's really was kind of the crux of how we got this started, and looking and wanting to get a little bit of board input before we just came back to you with recommendations, recognizing that there are some different looks on that. It also seemed that from from all the agencies, rather than just getting a bill all of a sudden for a large capital project that you would have the opportunity to be paying in a little bit over the years, preparing for whatever that capital project is. And then the final was in regards to the budget, and submitting the budget on time. It appears to us, looking backwards, that what the staff in the past was trying to do was answer a lot of questions before they brought the budget. So some of those questions are, what are United's rates going to be? What are Cayugas's rates going to be? What are our capital needs going to be? And in order to get all those answers, the budget was adopted after July 1st. And so we're gonna have to make some assumptions to bring that to you by July 1st, but that's what all your agencies do. That's what cities do. You have to kind of make those assumptions. And so that's the way we would be setting up the budget for this year. So hope that was kind of a long answer to maybe a shorter question, but that's kind of what brings us here. So that being said, we're 100% open to any feedback and how the board wants to see this, because that's, we're trying to bring it back to you in a fashion that everybody's happy with.
I believe Member Bouchard has an additional comment.
It's really a question. I'll get it by the look on your face when I ask it. Being that this is always a challenge, and this agency really has a sole focus, right? Cities, our district, right, we operate multiple different accounts, so we maintain this July 1st to June 30 fiscal year budget cycle. I'm curious what it would do to your program, or whether it would be helpful for you if this board, because it does one thing, it delivers wholesale water, was to consider a budget that was in October, that followed the water year, September 30 to October 1st, and whether that would be problematic for you. Is it helpful? I'm just throwing it out there because we've moved everything else to a water year. Whether or not aligning that creates problems, I'm not suggesting we need to. I'm just throwing it out as an option given the timing questions.
Yeah, I've got to just think through it, because we do all of the disbursements and everything so centralized, and then our other fiscal year is June 30th. So I just got to think through how that would impact our closing for the city. Yeah. that's
Totally
the only thing,
understand.
yeah.
I don't know. I mean,
Yeah.
if I was in your shoes, I'd be like, you're asking me to go through a budget cycle for 8 months now. But I get it. Thank you.
I'm not hearing any additional comments from the board members. Were there any public comments received on this item?
No public comments.
All right. Are there any additional comments from the board? Hearing none, we have a recommendation to receive and file this report. May I have a motion and a second?
Move to approve.
Second.
So we have a motion and a second. If we could please have a roll call vote.
Member McQueen-Lejeune,
Yes.
Member Bouchard,
Yes.
Vice Chair Debley,
Yes.
and Chair Hernandez.
Yes,
Motion approved.
So moving on, I'd like to remind agency members that all requested item, actually agency members' reports, comments, and requests for future agenda items I'd like to remind agency members that all requested items will require a motion, a second, and a majority vote to be placed on the future agenda. Does anyone have any reports, comments, or requests for future agenda items? Hearing none. Moving into our reorganized agenda, we will now go into closed session. Yes? All
Yes.
right. Mr. Agency Attorney, please read the closed session item into the record.
Absolutely, Chair Dibley,
I'd like to excuse myself.
of course, and you need to declare conflict.
Yeah, I will be not attending the closed session for a potential conflict with my current employer, Pleasant Valley County Water District.
Thank you. We have one item for closed session discussion tonight. That is conference with legal counsel, existing litigation pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.9 subdivision D1. The case name is OPV Coalition et al. Versus Fox Canyon Groundwater Management Agency et al. The case number is Santa Barbara Superior County Court, and the case number is listed in the agenda.
We will go ahead and excuse Member Bouchard and Member Jacobson. We will go into closed session. The time is now 4:41 p.m.
Good evening, all. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair Dudley, for stepping in. Appreciate it. I owe you.
Anytime.
Write that down.